My name is Raquel Black. Kia'ani Shlindo Sanjikine versus Chin. I am a member of the Navajo Nation and the co-working manager for Change Labs. Thank you for taking your time to be here with us today. And I'd like to give a brief introduction of Change Labs for those who are not aware of who we are and what our organization does. Officially, Change Labs is a Native-led and Native-controlled nonprofit organization based on the Navajo and Hopi nations. Here at Change Labs, our goal and our mission is to provide creative workspace tools, resources, and knowledge for Native entrepreneurs. One of the most popular questions we get here at Change Labs is, how do I start a business? All of our programs and services here are designed to help Native entrepreneurs, artisans, change makers, and vendors alike to both start up and strengthen their businesses. So if this is a question that you have, I have some more information that I want to share with you. One service we offer is business coaching. We offer free virtual 90-minute appointments with any of our coaches. Our coaches are available on Mondays, and they each have their own area of expertise depending on the kind of support you're looking for. We have a team of very bright and very eager coaches, such as Jessica Stego, our director of the Business Incubator, Christine Laughter, the director of our Kinship Lending Program, our finance director, Marsha Greyeyes, and a few of our other coaches are Cecilia So, Tim Deal, and Joe Elliott Nez. They are each incredibly knowledgeable in each of their specialties and will be able to assist you where you're needing help with your business. They are able to assist you in areas of marketing to accounting and bookkeeping systems, or creating a business model and navigating the Navajo Nation systems for things such as your business site lease or registering with the Navajo Nation Business Regulatory. You can find more information here or book an appointment with any one of our coaches at the link here, nativestartup.org/events. The next thing I'd like to talk about is our Business Incubator program. Change Labs runs one of the only Native-led business incubators for Native entrepreneurs in the United States, and we're right here in Northern Arizona. It's a 12-month program for entrepreneurs who want support and training on how to start and run your business on the Navajo or Hopi nations. The program is led by Jessica Stego, our director of business incubation. Change Labs will be accepting applications for the next round of entrepreneurs who want to participate in this program later this year. Our current entrepreneurs that are with the incubator right now are getting really close to graduation. So if you're interested and would like assistance with your logo, your website design, marketing, your finances, please check out our website for more information. Our link is here at nativestartup.org/incubator. Another common question we get here at Change Labs is, how do I create a website? Until Change Labs can go back to hosting open studio hours at our headquarters in Tuba City, we will refer you to our YouTube channel. We currently have over 40 recorded discussions and sessions, each designed for Native business owners and all led by Native entrepreneurs and creatives. Our workshops cover topics like social media marketing, website design, doing business on the Navajo Nation, and many more. It's a growing archive with shared knowledge from other Natives and in our network of those who really want to see our Native people prosper. Another great resource we have is our social media platforms. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and I recommend you check out those pages for updates as well. We do post other links from other partners that we have and others in our network for great opportunities that they have, like grants and webinars that they post as well. I'd also like to refer you to our link here for our listings of all the resources, such as grant opportunities. We share and update that page regularly, so please visit our page at nativestartup.org/resources. Next is another question that we often get is, how do I get help running my business? There are so many aspects to being an entrepreneur, and the question or solution that you may have may not always be obvious. Here at Change Labs, one of our driving factors is kinship, building relationships among our communities and among our nations as well. How Change Labs can help here is through our co-working space. For those of you in or near Tuba City, Arizona, you may have been aware of our co-working studio over at the Moenkopi Legacy Inn campus for the past few years. That space is currently not available anymore, but the construction of our new headquarters, which is going to be located right next to the Tuba City Chapter House on Main Street, is currently underway. Starting later this year, we will have a co-working space available for you. And some services that we'll be able to offer to our local entrepreneurs are desk-based, Wi-Fi access, color printing, so coaching sessions, and more. We also plan to bring back our monthly in-person trainings for those who are interested. And our list of co-working services is constantly being updated as far as how we're planning to support our entrepreneurs in the community there at the new headquarters. We're really excited to bring this community space for everyone and to help with building and growing your businesses. Finally, there's a whole spectrum of who we consider Native entrepreneurs, and we here at Change Labs have been curating our own list of them. If you're in the market for finding other Native service providers who can help you with your business, or if you're maybe searching for Native-made products, visit the site here at resrising.org. We currently have over 600 Native-owned businesses listed in there that we think are really, really great resources for helping to start up and run your business. And thank you. Thank you for your time. If you have any more questions about Change Labs or are interested in any of our services and would like to know exactly where to start, feel free to email me anytime. My direct email is here, raquel@nativestartup.org. And now, before we start with our guest speaker of the day, I want to touch base on our workshop etiquette and how we can be respectful of our guest time today. We do ask that you stay on mute during the whole presentation, unless you're called on, of course. But feel free to populate the chat box with your questions, and we'll make sure to get to them before the end of our session today. And then also another reminder, our session is being recorded today. The session, along with many of our past sessions, will be available on Change Labs' YouTube channel later this week. Getting to our guest of today, we had Tahda Ahtone, owner of JackRabbit Development and Ahtone Law Firm. Tahda's here to speak about registering your business with the Arizona and Navajo Nation entities. And please help me in welcoming Tahda today. Hi, Tahda.
Hi, thanks. Thanks for that introduction, Raquel. So thank you for inviting me here today. Well, I really want to thank you all for coming and participate. Oh, great. There it is. Awesome. I really want to thank you all for coming and participating this morning. I would love to see with a quick raise of thumbs how many of you were here last week. So I don't want to go too much into stuff that might be a repetition of what you learned last week, but I also want to dive a little bit deeper this week and what we're going to discuss. I was asked to talk about laying a foundation for starting a dream. So as Raquel mentioned, I own a company, JackRabbit Development, and I am also an attorney that I started a law firm about a year ago out as a single sole practitioner. I went to school at ASU and I focused on federal Indian law. And when I got out, I went and worked at DNA People's Legal Services, working in Shinley. And from there, I just really experienced a lot of the situations with not having electricity or not having good water. And so I really set out to try to build better housing for people. And through that experience of trying to start a business and then trying to raise millions of dollars to start manufacturing for a small business, I really started to learn a lot about what it takes to grow and scale companies and to go from just a small idea and grow it into something much larger and change almost how I thought I was going to accomplish something into something that actually is marketable and sells. So when I started going to school, I started learning a little bit about business structures, but it wasn't really until I started having an idea about how to form a company that I started to really understand how this all plays in together. So I'm sorry I took us off view, and I'll keep admitting people, but maybe just from a quick show of hands or reactions, was anyone on last week? Did anyone get the privilege of hearing Joseph Austin speak, another attorney from the Navajo Nation, regarding entities and the creation of entities? Wonderful. Well, so when you start to think about a company, there are multiple different ways that you can start to think about a company. And I know Raquel has asked us to unmute, but I do want you to interrupt me if you have some sort of questions. I like to interact a little bit with everyone, and I want this to be really applicable to your lives because I'm a hands-on person and I learn better when I actually have something to apply it to and not just a hypothetical. And so When you're looking at types of entities, when people go to think, hey, I want to start a business, they're either generally thinking about being in a sole proprietor or about a corporation, things like Walmart or large companies like Apple. Those are types of corporations that are out there, but there can also be small corporations set up as well. Sometimes people form general partnerships, and that's where two or more people come together to operate a business. And sometimes people form limited liability companies, actually a lot of the time, because in forming corporations or in operating as general partnerships, there were problems. In general partnerships, there's a liability issue that applies to one of the partners because somebody has to be a general partnership, and only even within limited partnerships, someone generally still has to be a general partner. And so that exposes people to liability. And by when we talk about liability, what we mean is that people can come after your personal assets. So people could come after your second or third car, or people can come after your home in some sort of home insurance claim. People can do things that can attack your personal value that you start to generate your wealth through your business. And so in order to protect oneself from that type of liability, people look at starting corporations or limited liability companies or these limited partnerships. And then nonprofits are a whole different sector. So for today, we're going to sort of go into these in a quick overview of what they are. And then I'm going to take you through sort of how to register one of the companies with the state of Arizona and with the Navajo Nation. Does anyone have any questions before I go on? Great.
So I have a question. So you can be registered. So once you register, you would still be able to do business off and on the reservation?
Once registered in one jurisdiction, you can do business there. And then if you intend to do business in another jurisdiction by going into that jurisdiction and doing work, you need to register in that jurisdiction as well. So
okay.
If you are doing business in Arizona and then going into the Navajo Nation, you'll need to register as a foreign entity operating in the Navajo Nation. Or alternatively, if you started your company in the Navajo Nation or another tribal jurisdiction and then but decided you were going to be doing business off reservation, you would need to then register your company as a foreign entity in those other jurisdictions. And same with cross states. So say you start to do business in Arizona or Navajo Nation, and then you go up to Mississippi and you want to do business there, you would then also register your company in that state as well. And there's a difference about doing business if you're going to the jurisdiction to doing work, or people are consulting you and they're coming to your jurisdiction to do work. It's a matter of where was the work physically done. But that really gets more into tax purposes a lot as well. And if you happen to be doing work in different jurisdictions, you're going to want to register. And after today, you should be very comfortable registering within the different jurisdictions because you're going to learn the basics. And once you go through those basics, it's essentially applying that same knowledge to a new jurisdiction.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yes. Oh, great. Awesome. 1+, I see you raised your hand.
Hi, my name is Jacqueline. I own a bakery here in Gallup, New Mexico, and we are we currently own a bakery and a tea room. The tea room just opened just recently, and now I'm looking at opening another business in Window Rock. So I would have to register my business as a foreign entity on the Navajo Nation, but it would be more of a coffee shop / tea room. We would actually manufacture all of our products here in Gallup and then take it over there. But my question is, would it be better and easier for me to just register to acquire a new business name for that instead of having to go through the process of going through having to be a foreign entity on the Navajo Nation?
That is a great question. So I'm going to take these down and break down a lot of what you just said into a few different questions and how we're going to apply this. So do you mind if I use your situation as a hypothetical as we go through?
I don't mind. Go ahead.
Okay, great. We're going to talk about that stuff as we get through. So I'm not sure how you run your company now, but you might be registered as a sole proprietor, or you might be operating under a single entity.
I'm an LLC.
Great. Awesome. So she's already set up some sort of protection. Sole proprietors essentially are just one person operating as an individual going out and doing business. This could be the person selling burritos out on the side of the road. This could be an artisan selling their jewelry to a marketplace. If you haven't really set up a business such as an LLC or a corporation or a partnership, then you're operating as a sole proprietor. That means that essentially you're deducting everything on your own individual taxes. You're essentially accounting for that and then declaring that income to the IRS as that sole proprietor. But you also are probably not registered with the state or with the nation, meaning that you aren't reporting to Business Regulatory Office, and you are not exactly registered at a state level as a sole proprietor. Because that's how a lot of people start out doing business, is just, maybe I'm not sure how you man started, but maybe you started out just selling cakes or something and you thought, oh, I can make this a business, and grew it from there. So as a sole proprietor, you are exposing yourself to liability, and it also makes it a little bit more difficult later on in trying to get contracts as far as expanding your business, because generally people who do government contracting want to see some form of entity in place that is operating for liability purposes, but also to show that you are moving forward. Or if you're trying to raise money, this can make a difference when you are a sole proprietor, because they're going to look solely at your assets as an individual and won't be able to necessarily bring in debt equity or group financing, like sort of collating financing. So this is not necessarily the best entity to operate as. It's not really even an entity. You're operating as yourself if you're trying to grow a business. So it sounds like, and I'm sorry, I'm really bad with names, but I'm going to call you the Gallup Bakery. It sounds like the Gallup Bakery wants to grow and to expand. And so this would have not been her best choice going forward if she wanted to grow past just a small shop. So corporations are really a much more formal entity. Corporations can happen with one to multiple people, and you can come in essentially and have the protection and formality of an entity, and essentially operate at a larger scale. So if you're looking to really grow a company into something large, like a Starbucks, or you want to become somebody selling beyond just a small entity, you want to really look at a corporation, because this allows you to really bring in financing in a larger way, because you can separate your shares out. You can separate control from profits out. But as I said, this requires a lot more formality in your business, because you will have a board of directors that can be one to multiple people in the state of Arizona, also in Navajo Nation. But you also have officers. And so officers are sort of the people who do the day-to-day work of a corporation, while the board of directors are the people who oversee it. Fortunately, as I mentioned, you can have multiple people doing multiple jobs as far as being a board of director and an officer, but it does take a lot more formality to put into place. And so I'm going to assume that most people right now are not looking at starting corporations for this webinar. Is there anybody on here who is looking at starting a corporation? We're really going to focus. Oh, and one of the things that I like to point out in this is that a lot of people will talk about being an S Corp and starting an S Corp. And there's some confusion around that. So an S Corp is a taxation label that you get, you apply for it at the IRS level. When you become and opt to be an S Corp, you can either be a corporation or you can be an LLC. And essentially it's a way in which you're taxed and look at taxing. So as an LLC, like the bakery, the Gallup Bakery, they could opt to be taxed as an S Corp. And at that level, if she was a sole member in her LLC, she could start to receive W-2s, and she could start to pay for her FICA and Social Security at the front end on her business expenses, rather than having to individually do that on her own once she receives her 1065 out of her company as an LLC. So I'm going to go on to, again, just in case you do think about becoming a corporation, some of the things and documents you'll hear about within that are bylaws. That's essentially the rules and regulations that you will abide by that set out how shares are acquired, how people vote within the corporation, who has what responsibilities and duties. And so that's all pretty much outlined within the bylaws of a corporation. And then you must have at least one authorized set of shares. But if you're looking to raise money ever as a corporation or switching your LLC into a corporation, as I mentioned, you can separate out your stocks and your shares, your memberships, essentially from ownership and profits and control. And so that's something that a lot of people look at when looking at trying to do equitable financing, is how do you allow someone to invest money into your company? Say you need to purchase equipment, or say you need to have a line of credit in order to get supplies while you're waiting for your payments to come in from the people you're vending them on to. And so in that sense, it allows you to separate that type of profit sharing and money in from who actually controls and makes the rules and regulations for the corporation. And then the articles of incorporation are the documents that you would file at the level of either the tribe or the state in order to start one of these entities. Also, this certificate of disclosure is essentially saying that nobody has committed fraud before or has had to file for bankruptcy. And there's one other thing in there, but essentially that certificate of disclosure just lets them know that nobody has been involved in those things before that are on there. I provided a link. And once you read through it, I'm assuming most people will say no to most of those questions. If you do end up saying yes, for instance, maybe you filed a bankruptcy before, it just requires additional documentation to them to ensure that proper monitoring is going on within the organization itself. Because this does sort of take the liability off of the individual or the group of individuals, and it places them onto the corporation itself. Does anyone have any questions?
I have a question. Let's just say, for instance, okay, I have my main business, which is the main LLC, which is I Need Sugar. And then I wanted to branch off of that. Like if there was, instead of I Need Sugar Tea Room, I wanted to name it Spill the Tea. And then I wanted to name something else, under another tea line or coffee line, and I wanted to name that something else under that umbrella of I Need Sugar. How much would something like that cost to get articles for that?
So you are asking great, very detailed questions, and I really appreciate that. That means you're really thinking about expanding your business, and that's great. So there are a couple of ways that people look at this, and we will stop for a second to kind of go at corporations and LLCs. Corporations, when they get taxed at the corporate level, and then any dividends that come out, they get taxed to the individual. LLCs actually are a pass-through taxation method. And so when setting up different companies, there are a few ways to do it. You can set up different brands underneath one company. So where we saw the doing business as, you might start a brand and say, my LLC, Gallup Bakery, is now doing business as I Need Sugar. And I Need Sugar is one of our tea rooms that gets set up in a city. And then we're going to start I Need Another Sugar out in California. And all those I Need Sugars are all essentially still Gallup Bakery. They're just operating under a different name, but everything else is the same. So it's not necessarily starting a new company. It's just starting a brand within your company. But also, there are different ways within an LLC and corporation structure to, again, separate that liability and be mindful of your taxation of how this comes together. So maybe you want to set up parent companies where it's Gallup Bakery, who owns all sorts of Gallup coffee companies across the nation. But Gallup coffee companies aren't the same company as Gallup Bakery in the sense that you've got different people who run them. They need different supplies and materials. You know, they have a different type of setup than a bakery. And so really you want to start them as a separate company. Theoretically, an LLC can be the sole member within a corporation, and a corporation could get set up in order to help bring in other financing. So Gallup Bakery could own 60, 70%, 50%, depending on how your financing goes and what you can bring to the table. But in that sense, you can bring in other partners into your corporation that you structure underneath your initial LLC, and that allows for financing to come in. Then there are other ways where people will have all the LLCs going up to a corporation. They have one large corporation, and that corporation is the sole member in multiple different LLCs. Again, it depends on how you're trying to finance an operation and how you bring in money, because at some point it is easier for investors to get behind corporations as far as selling stock and shares and the transfer of stock and shares. And if you're looking to grow large, maybe you need lots of financing and you're looking to have a large operation, then you might want to go out and start actually raising capital for that. You want to go and do those types of pitches to venture capital people, or you want to go around to banks and you want to try to access large scale financing. It makes it easier to do it through the corporation level than it does through an LLC. And that's partially because at the LLC level, everybody is sort of an individual member, whether or not it's a company or not. And you have to redo the operating agreements every single time you go through and redo that. And in fact, I was just reading in Minnesota that if before 1999, if people changed out of an LLC, they actually had to dissolve completely the LLC. And so in thinking about some of these entities, and as the title of our webinar today explains, you really need to be mindful of what you are trying to accomplish in order to really choose the best entity. Because if you're only looking to be a small mom and pop shop, an LLC is going to be great. But if you're looking to be a Starbucks or a large corporation that is doing business like in multinational places, then you're really going to want to look at one of these larger entities, or these entities like a corporation. And maybe you're trying to get to a corporation level in that type of large business, but you're going to start as an LLC. Then within your documents, you would want to reserve the right to switch into a corporation later if you're looking to raise that type of financing. And it's really dependent upon the type of business that you're doing and how to structure it. So for the Gallup Bakery example, as an LLC, she could start another corporation. The Gallup Bakery could go out and start other corporations of which they own underneath if they were looking to bring in financing, because, in order to start a brick and mortar store in other locations, that takes money. And in order to raise money, you need to go out and either access debt financing or equity financing. And there are some rules around that, just so you know, in raising money. If you're going out and trying to raise equity money, as far as saying, hey, people, I'm trying to raise money, there's actually registrations with the SEC that need to be done. And so I'm not sure if anyone saw, but the virtual guru, she just went through her first Native American woman to successfully raise a Series A. That's all done at a federal level as far as registrations and how you can go out and publicly say, hey, I'm raising money for my company. But we're not going to get into that today. So if you want to discuss more of that, we'll go into that later. So we sort of talked about already the LLCs, but just for a brief overview, a limited liability company is essentially the best of both worlds between corporations and sole proprietors. They're a lot easier to set up than a corporation. You don't have to have this deviation of officers and board members. You can have one person or multiple people within an LLC. And it's just a little bit less formality as far as the reporting requirements go. So every year, corporations have to file annual reports. Limited liability companies don't actually have to do that. And so it's just slightly different when it comes down to those administrative tasks, but it offers the best as far as the limited liability. So every member within an LLC gets that shield of liability. So they're not personally liable for what happens within the company, unless there's like gross negligence or fraud. But otherwise, it sort of shields each of the members. It also, as I mentioned, has that pass-through taxation. And so if you're a member within an LLC, you actually receive a document from the LLC that has your percentage of profits or losses, and each member will receive that document, and then you file that document with your own personal taxes. And so whether or not your entity actually puts out money, so maybe you made $100,000, let's take that back. Maybe you made $10,000 in profits, but you kept all that money within the company because you were trying to grow your company and needed money in order to scale. Well, you as an individual are still going to get taxed if you're a sole member at 10,000 in profits, or maybe if there's 3 of you or 4 of you, you're each going to get taxed at your percentage in your profits, whether or not you actually receive that money. So that's called the pass-through taxation that I was discussing before. Whereas if you're a shareholder in a corporation and you don't actually get a dividend that year, then you're not taxed at your individual level for that taxation. This is also where we had previously mentioned about that S Corp taxation method, which I'll get to later, and how you can sort of work with yourself as a member. Maybe you need a W-2 or things like that in order to be an employee of your own limited liability company. And so just so you're mindful within this, I've seen a lot of people start limited liability companies, and they don't actually do this really one important thing, which is you need to have an operating agreement. Even as an individual, you need to have an operating agreement because you're going to have banks who asks for that when you go to start a bank account, but you're also going to have other people ask for it as well if you ever tried to bring in investors, or if you're taking leases or things like that, they might ask you for your copy of an operating agreement. This also helps to create that shield of liability. So if something ever happens to a company and they haven't put these types of documents into place, at least have them in place, then somebody can come in and do what is called piercing the shield and say, oh, you're really just operating as a sole proprietor because you didn't put into place these operating agreements. You didn't have these documents necessary to create that shield there, so we can come after your personal assets. So I'm sure that Change Labs has probably a template of an operating agreement to at least start an individual on. And essentially that operating agreement, again, just lays out the rules and responsibilities of individuals, also what ownership, share, or control they might have. You could have different levels of membership within your LLC. So you might have members who are silent partners. They don't really have a voting interest within the company, but they take in profits, or vice versa. And so that operating agreement really lays out for everybody, what is going on, what are the rules and regulations that we are abiding by within our own entity itself. And so you can get really creative there as well. Some things that I've seen that should be addressed within operating agreements if you have multiple partners is expenses. What sort of expenses will get charged to the company if people are staying in 5-star hotels. One member is, but another member staying at a Motel 6. How do you make that equitable for each of the members? And another thing that I hear a lot of questions about and people get caught up on is the statutory agents. And so just to let everyone know what a statutory agent is, The statutory agent is the person who receives notice on behalf of the entity. You'll have one of these in a limited liability company and also in a corporation. And so that person is a person who resides within the jurisdiction where the entity is either doing business or is incorporated or licensed. So that's your home, sort of your home state or your home tribe, if you will. And that person is literally just someone who receives the mail and receives notices, which could come in person. If you've ever watched a movie and you see someone get served and that person walks up and says, "You're served," that's the person who's the statutory agent, is the person who gets served and says, "Oh, okay, we know that something's going on that we need to be aware of." So just as a thing, there aren't a lot of statutory agents operating in the Navajo Nation. So if anyone sets up that type of business, it would be a really wonderful thing for entrepreneurs, because people who have companies set up in, for instance, Arizona, who want to do business on the Navajo Nation, they have to have a statutory agent that physically resides within the Navajo Nation themselves. Also notaries. Another thing that really important, there aren't enough notaries. So if anyone's looking for a business that's pretty steady income, that's a great business idea, but it only works for people who are actually residing in the nation. And that can go for anywhere. I've seen the going rate for that from $100 to $400 a year, just for literally signing your name on a piece of paper and being willing to check your mail or answer the door. So talk to me afterwards if you want more information on that. Does anyone have any questions before I move on? Also, just on the last thing, we talked about pass-through taxations, but another thing that a lot of people will get confused upon in filing the paperwork is whether or not you are a member-managed LLC or manager-managed LLC. A member-managed LLC essentially means that you, as the members, are doing the day-to-day tasks of the organization. So you're running the sales, or you're doing the bookkeeping, you're doing the administrative work of getting the business running and going. A manager-managed entity essentially just means that you all are doing great and you actually have the ability to hire somebody to come in and manage your business for you. So that person actually gets hired on to do the administrative work, as far as making sure that the documents are filed, making sure the tax documents got there, all this reporting and administrative stuff that actually is sort of in the background of people running businesses. So if you're paying someone as like a W-2 employee to do that type of work for your organization, then you select a manager-managed LLC. But if you yourself are running the day-to-day tasks of getting it, and this is probably where most people start out, is as a member-managed, then you just select that. And it just identifies for them who is responsible for getting these administrative documents turned in and reported on. So a few of the questions that do come up that I've seen or come across are whether or not you need to have a professional limited liability company. And so just, or just a limited liability company. I'm going to play this quick video because it's just a lot easier and not having to recreate the wheel to try to get there. This is from a law firm here in Arizona, and it really explains the difference within Arizona, why you would need a professional limited liability company, but it's a really small subset of people who would actually need this type of entity. So I'm just going to play it really quickly for you all.
Hey guys, Taylor Mathis here, the Kiowa Girl, Marketing Director and Legal Assistant at Kiowa. Today I'm going to tell you guys what the difference is between an Arizona PLLC versus an Arizona LLC. But first, give this video a like, comment with any questions that you guys have, and subscribe to our channel for more videos. So what are the differences between an Arizona professional limited liability company and an Arizona limited liability company? And when would somebody form a PLLC instead of an LLC? So only 3% of Arizona LLCs are PLLCs. Very few people are required to form an Arizona PLLC. Professional limited liability companies means a limited liability company organized for purposes that include rendering one or more categories of professional services. Professional service means a service that may be lawfully rendered only by a person licensed or otherwise authorized by a licensing authority in the state to render the service. This means that an Arizona PLLC is an LLC that provides professional services that may be performed only by a person who is licensed by a limited number of professionals in Arizona, such as medical doctors, certified public accountants, attorneys, and real estate agents. The following provisions apply only to Arizona PLLCs. 1, the articles of organization must state that the company is a professional limited liability company. 2, the articles of organization must state the professional service or services that the company is organized to provide. 3, the name of the PLLC must contain the words professional limited liability company or the abbreviations PLLC, PLC, PLLC, or PLC. 4, the professional limited liability company may issue membership interests only to A, individuals who are licensed by law in Arizona or another state to render a professional service described in the articles of organization. Arizona states those persons may be rendered the professional services to any other business form or entity, including a limited liability company formed under a general law of this state other than this chapter, unless the use of the form or entity is expressly prohibited by the licensing law of this state that is applicable to the profession or by the board that has jurisdiction over the profession. This statute says that a person who is licensed by a profession in Arizona is not required to form a PLLC and provide the professional services through the Arizona Professional Limited Liability Company, unless the Arizona Licensing Authority requires the use of a PLLC. To our knowledge, the only profession that requires its licensed professionals to form an Arizona PLLC is the real estate sales agent profession. Arizona realtors do not have to form a professional corporation or a professional LLC unless they want their real estate commission paid by their broker to an entity rather than directly to them. Doctors, lawyers, and accountants in the past were required to form Arizona professional corporations or Arizona PLLCs, but currently they are not required to. So there you guys have it. Now you should have an idea what the difference is between an Arizona PLLC and an Arizona LLC. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it. Comment below if you guys have more questions about PLLCs and LLCs. And of course, subscribe to our channel for more videos like this one.
As you can see, they have a lot of videos as well. And I could not have said it more succinctly than she did there. So if you're not in one of those professions, you don't really need to worry about a professional limited liability company, and your licensing agency will let you know if you need to set one up. Okay. Awesome. So just to briefly kind of recap that the S Corps are essentially a designation that gets put on from the IRS. You are really either starting a corporation or you're starting an LLC and you get designated. Your accountant can help you file this form 2553 with the IRS. And at one point when I first started doing business, I had been told by an accountant that it really wasn't worth doing this unless I was making a bunch of money within the LLC, and she had put the amount at $250,000. As I've moved more into doing business, because I've now owned my company for about 5 years now, what I have learned is that essentially if you have a reason to be an S Corp, such as wanting to be a W-2 employee. So maybe you're looking to purchase a house, or maybe you want to ensure that you're paying out your Social Security and your FICA and Medicare, then you can opt to be taxed as an S Corp. And that would allow you then to pay yourself as a W-2 employer within an LLC. As an S corporation, when you start a corporation, that corporation is going to start paying you as an individual. If you're working for them, the corporation needs to be paying you, and that comes out as a W-2 employee. But if you're a member within an LLC, unless you've been opted to tax yourself as an S corp, you aren't issuing yourself a W-2 form. You are actually issuing yourself a guaranteed payment. And so once you get that guaranteed payment, you will then show that on your taxes as income. But there, as I've found out recently, actually, in dealing with some client work, there are companies out there that will tell you, and I actually addressed this with Paychex themselves, that they were saying LLCs could be paying their members, not their employees, but their members, the owners, as W-2 employees. And that's actually not correct. You will get in trouble with the IRS for doing that, because members of an LLC, if not being taxed as an S corp, electing to be taxed as that, have to pay themselves within guaranteed payments. And so there are some things to be mindful again about, how the entities actually work. So if you're hoping to, be a W-2 employee, and that means having your FICA, Social Security, Medicare withheld at the employer level, then you want to make sure you set this up, essentially. Otherwise, don't do that. If you happen to have an LLC and you're one of the members, you need to continue to make guaranteed payments to yourself, and then you yourself get taxed at your individual level and have to remit over the Social Security, FICA, and Medicare. And you do that at your own individual level. So if you've ever heard about like 1099 contractors saying, oh, well, I got hit really hard with taxes, it's probably because when they were going out and pricing their services, they didn't account for the taxes. So when they thought they had made $1,000, they're really probably only making $750, because $250 of that is actually going to go over to the government in taxes for your income. So it's just something to be mindful of and to set aside if you're operating at that LLC level. Also, there's something out there called B Corps, and B Corps essentially are a certification. So you can be an LLC, or you could be a corp or a sole proprietor. And it's just a certification out there that you get from another company. And it really talks about, whether or not you're acting at an equitable and sustainable model of business. And so it's sort of a trendy term right now going around. And so I thought I would at least let you know what that is, but there's nothing that you actually file that's a B Corp. It's a certification done by another agency. And nonprofits. I'm not going to focus a lot here on nonprofits, but I do get asked a lot about helping people start nonprofits. And so some brief things I just wanted to go over of things that I see a lot, which is, one, a nonprofit is a business. You are running a business, operating a nonprofit, whether or not you're doing fee for service or offering some sort of service, you are running a business. You are just getting a tax exemption from the IRS in the form of maybe 501c3 or maybe some other form of tax exemption under the 501 code. It might be a C4 or a C19 if it's like a private military organization. But what I seem to encounter is that people, when thinking, oh, we're going to start a nonprofit, don't understand that they actually do need to make a profit in order to keep the lights on, in order to pay the employees. Otherwise, everyone's just volunteering. So if you're trying to grow a nonprofit or really start a great nonprofit, you do have to run it like a company. You are just really getting a tax exemption for the type of work that you are doing, which is generally charitable. Well, it has to be charitable for a nonprofit. So I just wanted to let people know. Also, one of the other things that I see consistently is a confusion around the roles and responsibilities of board members and officers. And so board members are really sort of the hierarchy level of the corporation. They ensure that the officers are doing their jobs. They also ensure that the mission and vision of the nonprofit or the corporation are being carried out, essentially. The officers are the ones that are doing that day-to-day task. So they might also be board members, or they might be completely different individuals who are operating as officers. So the officers are overseen by the board members and respond to, or are sort of, that's their boss. The board is the boss of the officers in that sense. I see a lot of confusion around that, around the roles and responsibilities of board members. Board members really shouldn't be doing the day-to-day task of a nonprofit. That's for the roles of the officers. And so when you hear about like working board members, the boards are operating as officers and doing both roles, but when separated with enough individuals, you can really start to distinguish whose duties and responsibilities are what within that nonprofit. We're going to dive into trying to register an entity. I've pulled up the Arizona Corporation Commission because I'm assuming a lot of people are in Arizona. If you want something on New Mexico or Utah and Nevada, I've also done some stuff with Nabetsi to show some other videos that I can share that go through that type of registration step by step. But if you all haven't been here, here is the Arizona Corporation Commission website. I am going to go through the Navajo Nation in a little bit. A lot of people, and for full disclosure, a lot of people start businesses off reservation because generally they're looking to get into business a little bit faster. And usually this registration process takes about 10 or 15 minutes. If registering a business for the first time in Navajo, or even registering as a foreign entity, it can take anywhere from like 3 to 6 months to get registered. And so you'll see a lot of people who will start their businesses here and then register it later as a foreign entity within another tribal jurisdiction. This is also a little bit easier for people to find if, again, you are trying to raise money for growing your company. This is a little bit easier for people to find because there isn't an online registration system for most tribes. In fact, I don't know of any tribes that have an online registration system. So if anyone's looking to verify any type of information for a company, it's easier to find it here within these types of state registration systems than it is within the tribal registration systems. So hopefully our tribe administrations will catch up to that and get this type of system going within the communities. So also, just so you know, if you really want to make sure you're at that .gov, because I've taken other classes in, and, you know, if we just type in Arizona Corporation Commission into like a Google search or a DuckDuckGo search, they will pull up 2 or 3 other companies that are not actually the Arizona Corporation Commission. It's another company that's trying to sell you the service of doing this for you. So just be mindful if you're in another state, or if you're doing this in Arizona, that you actually get to this .gov website. And in New Mexico, it's actually the Secretary of State where you register, and Utah has a one-stop shop. So if you want to go in and just start a corporation or an LLC, you come in here and it's very easy. It'll take you to this site. And then I actually already have an account set up, but if not, you have to first register an account right here. If you don't have one, you just go through that process. That's literally name and email address and password. Once you set up your account with Arizona Corporation Commission, you're going to come into this dashboard. And this dashboard essentially is where you will always log into, so you can find your entities that you have. If they've sent you any alerts, they'll be here, or correspondence. If you get through filing something and then you don't get to finish it, you're going to find it in here. And all these drop downs, so you can see your shopping cart. So this is essentially where you come to start everything on the Arizona side. And essentially, you can just tap here, create a new LLC. We already went over, we're not going to create a professional limited liability, but we're coming in here to start a limited liability company. And then it literally just takes you through a step-by-step process, which is really convenient if you're the sole member of an LLC. Gallup Bakery, do you have other members within your LLC?
Unfortunately, no. We had to adjust some stuff. So right now, I'm the only person at this time.
Okay. And so a lot of people are. Do we have any people here who do have multiple members or are planning on having multiple members in an LLC? Just out of curiosity.
I have a question. There was a story I heard of a previous owner that had listed all her kids as members of her LLC.
Oh, okay. What happened in that story? Out of
I
curiosity.
have no idea. Somebody was telling me that this person had gone to a forum and discussed her business and how she created that boards list and how she suggested that to people within this business environment. And I was like, I don't think that's legal. And I think she could get a lot of trouble for that. And I'm surprised nobody said anything about that.
Well, I think it actually is legal. So you can make any person a member within your LLC. You can have your child, theoretically, if they're over the age of 18, be a member within an LLC. You can't have like a minor child necessarily be a member within an LLC. But yeah, you can have anyone. You choose who you want to go into business with. And as people who may have owned companies before, who've been in business, you'll find that there are really good business partners and there are not so good business partners. And so in order to protect yourself, that's really where that operating agreement comes into play. And the reason I asked about the multi-member and the operating agreement is you will want to upload that document. So if you automatically know you're going to have more members within this LLC that you create, then you want to make sure by the time we get to step 7 right here, where it says upload documents, that you have an operating agreement in place with your fellow business members and business partners, because you're going to want to upload that when you register your LLC saying, oh, but this is the statement of organization. So it will list who the partners are and potentially what their ownership and control is. Because if you don't list that and say you have 4 members who come into an LLC and we list all of them here in the principal address and the principal information. And then when we get to this spot, if we just went with the state document, because this will literally allow us to fill out. So it's almost like filling out a template, the way that the state has it set up with the registration process, then it would default. And if we didn't upload our own document here, it would say, oh, each member gets 25%. But maybe that's not what you intended with your business partners. Maybe one person owns the majority of the entity and the other own, the last 49 or 47% in a 3-way split. Or maybe some people have less ownership. And so you really just want to spell that out within the organizing documents, what each member's profits and voting shares are, because you can separate those two out when you form your business, or you can always come back and amend it. So we're just going to put in, oh, I'm sorry. Did you have another question?
No, I just said thank you for that. But I think when she did that, it's several years ago. So I know her kids were all underage. There was probably one that was probably about 18, just turned 18. So all of the rest of them were all trickling down to probably about 6 years old. So that's why I was thinking, I don't think that's.
Yeah, no, then you're right. So you can't put people on here who are no principals under the age of 18 within the company. Now you can spell out, for instance, your transfership. And thank you for reminding me. I have heard some stories during COVID of single member LLCs and the member dying. And in that sense, there was no succession plan in place, and there wasn't anything spelled out in the documents about what happened to the company when that single member passed on. And so those are all things that you all should be thinking about when creating a business, is actually the succession. And so if you go back to that Keat law, you saw that they form LLCs, they do wills and trusts. And I'm actually about to give a presentation this weekend to another group about wealth transfer, intergenerational wealth transfer. And that's essentially what are your succession plans? Do you have a will in place or some sort of trust, or what is in your business documents that would allow for either the selling of the membership or the carrying on of the LLC if there's somebody else who's willing to step into that position? Or do you allow it to be transferred to potentially your child in that sense, if maybe they wanted to run it, if they're an adult child, or can it sit into a trust for them? Maybe you've got a really massively profitable business that's going on, and you want to ensure that your family can take from that, or your child might be able to benefit from that and it continue on. So those are all things you plan within these documents, your organizing documents themselves and your operating agreement, but also are things as an individual that we should all be thinking about, because it really helps in life to plan for life. And that way we know what to do in times of trouble and how to carry things on. And so that things can go smoother when things are, being upset by the transition of life, essentially. So once you get into this document, the first is, do you have a name? So for purposes of this demonstration, we're going to use Gallup Bakery as our name. Usually you're not going to need to worry about, have you reserved a name for this entity? That might be if like something gets really trendy, right? And you want to save that name. You might go in and do this, but generally if you're just, starting something from your own idea, you came up with the name, you haven't told a lot of people, you're just going to go in and start the company. You don't need to go in and try to reserve the name. You might do this if maybe you have a trendy name and you haven't got all the documents together to form what you want to do or everything in line, then you might reserve it. But otherwise, just go ahead and start and say no. And you're not the owner of a trade name. So I'm going to move forward with that. Oh yeah, sorry. Okay, so as you saw, it's got to have either LLC or limited liability. In order to start an LLC, you have to have either this title, this title, this title, or this title, and you cannot use these names: association, corporation, or incorporated, or company, CO. You can't do any of that because that indicates these names right here indicate a corporation, while these names right here indicate the limited liability company. So these are actually indications to others who you will engage with in business, what type of business formation you have in place. So that's actually an important thing. So we're just going to go here and say LLC. It's going to ask us if we want to search. The name's available. Imagine that. Awesome. So once you find your name is available, and sometimes you might get it kicked back if you've got something really similar. So I own JackRabbit Development. There's another group out there called JackRabbit Development Group. And so it kicked back at first saying it wasn't okay. And then we just had to switch it up a little bit. So this is where you would put an entity email address. And I would really recommend that you put your own personal email address into this spot. And the reason being is that, say you have started like a company email or a domain name online with like GoDaddy or somebody, if you stop paying for that service, then this email goes away. So if you have like a Yahoo or a Google or an MSN type of email, that way you just ensure that you're always getting the emails despite what might be happening with the company email at the time. It's going to stamp this, so I'm just going to put my email in here for now because we are not going to file any of this. This is all hypothetical. And then it would say, oh, effective date is now. You can change this. Maybe you want to start the company in 2 months, but you're going to do everything now. You can't go backwards though. So you can't go back and say, oh, it started on August 1st. That doesn't happen. You have to go from either present or future. And then character of the business. Yeah, I agree. I'm going to receive those emails. Character of the business. For my purpose, And you can get into this. I would really highly recommend you don't. You just choose any legal purpose. That's why it's finally there. It wasn't there originally as an option, but they've added it, or other, but really any legal purpose. And the reason you do that is because if you choose construction, guess what? You're always going to have to do construction. Or if you choose manufacturing, you're going to always have to do manufacturing, and you can't go over and start doing construction because you said that your character of a business was different without coming back through and amending all of this stuff. So if you choose any legal purpose, that just allows for a broad option to occur and what type of business you might be doing. And I can give you a perfect example of this. When I started, I'm still into building off grid, but I really thought that I was going to be building off grid Earthships. And that's a type of architecture that was designed out of Taos, New Mexico. It takes rammed earth and it puts it into tires using recycled materials and can build an off grid structure. I found out after about a year that I was really hitting my head against a wall, proverbially and literally, and that I needed to switch my business approach. Also, I was coming in as a contractor when I really needed to be the designer. So I had to pivot my business in order to actually gain traction and gain sales. And so if I'd pigeonholed myself into construction, I would have had to have come back and redone and had to redo these documents. Whereas with any legal purpose, if you decide to pivot, and many of you will find that you probably will pivot, because in order to run successful businesses, you kind of have to figure out what's selling within the market or how to get people to buy what you're selling. And in that sense, you might pivot a little bit or multiple times before you really land on something that's working. Or even when you do land on something that's working, you might want to take on some sort of other thing that you're doing. On the statutory agent, as we mentioned, this is that person that gets that service. You might have a company. So there are companies, like I just said, somebody could start a Navajo Nation running as a statutory agent. And in which case we would say, yes, we're going to hire that company. It's either an entity that would put in the statutory agent search, or if you just have an individual operating as a statutory agent, you'd say no. And then it'll click over to individual. So say I'm operating as my own statutory agent because I live in the state of Arizona and I can operate as my own statutory agent. I would just create myself and go as an individual. So then they're going to ask for their name and their address. That in, so it'll let us move forward. And again, you can hire a company. So in Arizona, because there's more competition, and it starts off at like $40 a year to hire a company. In other states, such as Minnesota, you are actually required to hire a company. In order to have a statutory agent, it won't allow an individual to be a statutory agent. So it just depends on the jurisdiction. But as far as Arizona and New Mexico, as far as they're concerned, you can have an individual. Also, Navajo Nation individuals can be statutory agents. So this principal address, this would be the principal. So say you're a single person and you're operating as your own statutory agent. I'm going to say, yep, I'm the same person. Same street address, and go. And then the management. So remember where I'd said manager member information, the management structure, you're either going to choose this manager managed or the member managed. I'm going to say that I'm a member managed. And then for myself, I would choose myself as a member and then just start putting in my information again. Same as principal. I can say when I take office, let's say it's today. You don't have to fill that out, but you might want to in case you want to demonstrate how long people have been in the company. And then you're going to add the principal down here. There we go. I'm added. Organizer information. Now, this might be somebody else. So for instance, as a lawyer, I can help people register businesses in Navajo Nation. I can't in Arizona because I'm not licensed in Arizona, but you might have a lawyer who did that. And I'm actually looking to hire a lawyer licensed in Arizona. So I can do this. So if you have somebody else or a business do this, then they would fill out their articles of organization information. And that's just essentially who's online right now filling out this form. If it's yourself doing it, such as myself, you're just going to fill out your own information. If you hire somebody else, they're going to actually be the ones populating this information into the system and then submitting it on your behalf. Otherwise, they might be able to populate the information, but you still have to go through and verify the information and then submit it on your end. If you had like a paralegal doing some of the work. And then there's that upload document. So if you are your individual self operating an LLC as a sole member, you probably don't need to upload a document right here. All of this information would be fine. Otherwise, if you have more than one member in that LLC, you're probably going to want to upload your own document of articles of organization. And that would clearly state articles of organization. You're not uploading the operating agreement. But in that articles of organization, you can spell out, again, that ownership, the control and percentage on voting rights and profit sharing all within that document. And then you would just upload it here. So I'm going to say, do you want to use the E-Corp articles? Yes, that's saying, yes, I just want to use what you're providing. And then I would sign. I'm not going to sign because I'm not trying to actually submit anything right now to them and get this through. But literally, once you type your name in here and you add in your signature, certifying that all this information is correct, it would hit next. It'll populate up all that information for us to review in this section. And then once you hit done, it's going to ask you to pay. So the document fee is a $50 filing fee. You can expedite it. If you want to expedite it, that's for an additional $35. And then once you hit done, literally it'll charge your card, and within moments you will get feedback and it'll say that they're being reviewed. And within like an hour or two, you can actually pull up your company right here on, if we were going to look, if we were going to look for a business, we could go and look for it on searching stuff. And I've got to figure out where that is. I apologize. Oh, the entity search right there. So if I wanted to go look at it and say, oh, it's there, it'll pop up within an hour. And I see people raise their hands, so I'm almost done. I just also want to show you this online services because this is going to be really important. So if you have a company in another jurisdiction, you've already started Gallup Bakery and it's operating as a business, and you just want us to go and operate business in another jurisdiction in Navajo Nation or Arizona for this one, you would come in and file as a foreign entity. The reason being you're a foreign entity is because your home base and your formation of an entity is already in some other jurisdiction, either the Navajo Nation or New Mexico or Nevada. Those entities, and then you're coming in and saying, oh, but I really want to do Gallup Bakery here in Phoenix, and so here you're going to file here, and vice versa. If you're doing business and if you've registered your business in Arizona and you want to go into the Navajo Nation, you need to register there as a foreign entity. So I did pull up some of this, and I'll just pull up here to this website. I did see some people had questions, so do you want to ask them? I'm sorry, I can't see the share, or I can't see you to ask, but go ahead.
I raised my hand. This is Jackie again. So if I go into this entity information and I do a search on, let's say I want to do the spill the tea, but I don't want to do it as a domestic on the Navajo Nation. I mean, a foreign entity on the Navajo Nation. And I wanted to go ahead and do a new LLC name, but not under that umbrella, then I would go through this, right?
Yes,
you would. And then so if I were to do this and the name Spill the Tea is already active, but it's already registered, but it's inactive.
If it's registered in Arizona and it's inactive, you can actually petition the corporation to give you that name if it's been inactive for some time. But that's a whole process to go through and ask for that name to be given over to you. You might just want to come up with a different name.
So it's registered. I'm sorry. It's registered as Spill the Tea LLC, but if it's registered under Spill the Tea by itself, would that be a change? Or maybe Spill the Tea ...
Yeah, you might try to mess around with it in that sense. You're going to have that nomenclature, the LLC there. But you might just switch it up to something like Spill the Tea Time, or like you said, a ... The ... Is going to get difficult, just so you know, at the IRS level. And one of the, I can actually give you a perfect example of this and how this can be very confusing. I had a client who had a company name, and then they started a nonprofit with exactly the same name. And it has caused, except for literally the difference was nonprofit. They added nonprofit onto the end of their original name. And it has caused so much confusion when it comes to registering with the IRS, when it comes to registering with SAM and Cage Code. If you're doing any sort of government contracting, it has actually been a nightmare dealing with it. And so I would highly recommend that if you have someone's name who's very similar to yours, that you try to come up with something different. And the reason being is it's going to cause a lot of administrative extra work for you to do. You can do it. It's not like you can. We've gotten away with it, but it's taken us literally 2 to 3 times as long as it should to do anything, because we've had to clarify with everybody about the difference in the name and that it's not that entity, it's this entity.
I'll just spill the tea on the Nation.
Right?
I'm just kidding.
But
Thank
just,
you.
You know, and also, as you're kind of pointing out, you know, people can own multiple LLCs. So I own multiple different LLCs. I'm a member with multiple business partners in one LLC, and then I'm a sole member in another LLC. They do 2 sort of different things. They kind of overlap, but essentially, you know, then at the individual level, I'm having to account for all that different income into my own individual self. And so that makes it more complicated. If you have that, you really need to make sure you have a good accountant who can help ensure that you are separating those things out, but also accounting for the different incomes coming in as well. And then, you know, you can have multiple different people in different LLCs as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good morning, Tahda. This is Arlene.
Hi, Arlene.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I wanted to ask a question. We're kind of in a different setup under the chapter, Shanto chapter. SEDC, which is Shanto Economic Development Corporation. We're a corporation. And under us, we have the entity Shanto Commercial LLC. So my question was for the corporation, Shanto Economic Development Corporation. Mm-hmm. You went over the responsibility and duties of the board of directors and the officers. My question is regarding the CEO, CFN, CFO position. Mm-hmm. How do you, if there's like limited qualification people in the community, can board members take the role of CEO?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other question was, I think I'll ask it after you go over the Navajo Nation. It's with the Arizona Corporation Commission, but I'll go ahead and wait on that one. Thank you, Tahda.
Okay, great. Thanks, Arlene. And I know we're getting close to the time. I'm more than happy to stay and answer as many questions as you all have. If someone is really pressed for time and has to jump off in the 5 minutes, will you come ask your question first?
Hi, good morning, Tahda. My name is Stephanie Allison. Thank you for hosting this session. I really appreciate it. And thank you to Change Labs for hosting this session as well. So my question for you is, we do financial services for a lot of Indigenous people throughout Indian country, and I am starting to service business owners. So they're getting incorporated and they're doing all these the steps that you're going over. First question is, do you have contact information that I could take down? And then the second question is succession planning. So when we're doing succession planning in the portfolio, it always goes back into the individual. Do you handle trusts within the tribal lands, I guess? And I'm running into a lot of, I'm not able to find an attorney that handles trusts for entities that are on the Navajo reservation or any other tribes. They kind of get stuck because they don't have any experience with that. So I'm just curious if you're able to provide some services like that.
I appreciate that. Thanks. I personally don't do trust, but I do work with another attorney who does trusts. And so, I tag team. That's a lot of what I know is a lot of what I don't know. I know enough to know I don't know. So I bring in people who have that skill set, but I do work with an attorney who's licensed in Navajo who does do trusts. I focus more on wills and probate, but yes, we do have that. And I'll share my contact information at the end of this.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for this information. I'm looking at opening a nonprofit side of our business to where we can give back to the community through scholarship. So I think I get a general idea with the direction you've provided on how I would form that organization to ensure that we run it the right way from the ground up. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks. And I can help with starting nonprofits, but also, if you're just looking to give money to people, there are so many nonprofits out there that would take your donation dollars and do it because it's a lot of work. I'm sure Arlene and Raquel can tell you to start a nonprofit. And so I've seen that a lot where I've teamed people up with people who are like the right fit for nonprofits that are already running that type of philanthropic work. And that way it just alleviates that, because sometimes I think people just want to make sure their dollars are getting to the right places and they just need the proper organizations to align with. Not to dissuade you from starting a nonprofit, but if I can help you achieve your goal in another way that doesn't require a lot of paperwork, I'm all for it.
Awesome. I'll definitely take your contact information at the end of the call. Thank you again so much for this. And I really enjoyed this session because you really covered from the beginning to just walking us through online how to set up the organization. It's so simple. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi.
We have a question, Bradley and I. And one of the things, our situation, good afternoon. First of all, before I say anything, I wanted just to say thank you for the information that you're giving to us. It really hit every level of the planning of having to have ownership of your company and having to look at the budget and looking at the conciseness of the wording, the language of each document. Thank you for pointing that out very, very in detail. We appreciate it. So my situation is, our situation for me, I'm in school, in college, and pursuing my operations management degree. And I do have some, my major is business. And our question is, he's working, Bradley, and I'll let him introduce himself. And our question is, after he introduces himself, we'll present the question to you. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone. My question was, I started a business from the beginning, from the get-go. Yeah, I'm still working. And how would you make a smooth transition from leaving your job to running the company? When is the best time to leave the company? I'm working for NTA now, and when would be the best time to leave?
That is a great question. And I hate to be like, it really depends. That's like a typical lawyer answer. But what I can find is one, I just quit my job from experience. This is from my own personal experience. So if somebody has another experience, please share. But I just quit my job and I had saved up about $10,000 and was like, oh, that'll get me, I can budget it out. I can get about 5 months on that much money, paying all my bills before I have to really figure it out. And that in retrospect was really not the best choice for my family because it put a lot of stress on us. I mentally needed that because I was juggling a massive caseload at DNA, and I was also trying to figure out how to start this company with not really knowing what I was doing. And so I needed that time to try to figure it out. But by month 5, I was really financially stressed and had to start taking on like side jobs in order to make it work. And so I would not recommend that for anybody because it puts your family through a lot of unnecessary stress. What I would say is to start sort of on the side. And so if you can, get through some of this administrative stuff, get the business formed, get some of these documents in place, also start to maybe get some clients lined up, and then do work on the side. So you're not doing a full transition where you're just like, oh, I'm going to quit my job and it's all going to work out great. Because I did that. It did not work out great. But also you're going to know when you have sort of that pool, and there might be a little bit where you need to have some money saved, because trust me, I think a lot of people start businesses and don't realize the amount of costs it takes just to even start a company, beyond just those filing fees, having an accounting service in place, doing these documents. If you need documents, if you're going to raise money, a good pro forma and a pitch deck should cost you anywhere from like $7,000 to $10,000 just to go out and raise money. And that's not even talking about the SEC filings. But that said, you'll start to see where your cash flow comes in. And because that's also the lifeblood of a business is cash flow. If you're not getting that money in, then you can't pay yourself, you can't pay your suppliers, you can't pay your employees. And at first, there generally isn't. So businesses will have this weird lifeline where they kind of go up and it looks like they're making profits. And then really for like the first 1.5 to 2 years, they're going to sink and they're going to be way, way in the red. And that's because there's just this ebb and flow of business. So it's really in that bottom part where you're in the red that you need to be ensuring for yourself as an individual, and also maybe for your family or those who you employ, that you're having some sort of other cash flow come in. And that's where you don't just want to give up your business. So even Damon John from the Shark Tank, he talks about this, like, don't give up your day job immediately, try and keep that on the side if you can, or keep your business on the side and grow it on the side until you can account for that. Because that's a lot of also what I see with business owners is we don't account for our own time. And so while you might be charging your customers a certain price, you're not actually factoring in what it costs to pay you to do the work that you do. And I am a victim of that myself. I wasn't factoring in what my true cost was or understanding my real value. And literally half of what I've spent the last few years doing is really understanding my value. And you'll start to understand that as well in the service.
I have a question. So we started out, our business is called Eagle Eye Network Cabling and Surveillance Systems. And we, our major functions are fiber optic cabling and also surveillance systems with cameras. And we're looking at contracts that will be like RFPs, requests for proposals. Mm-hmm. So the question that we have is that we started out as a sole proprietor, but we do want to go towards LLC. The question is, should we just start out as LLC or just keep it as is?
Are you in the Navajo Nation?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Sorry. I'm licensed in the Navajo Nation, so I can actually say I would advise you to just start an LLC. And you can register that there in Navajo Nation. You're on Navajo Nation, so it would be a lot easier to form an LLC in Navajo Nation. You should also certify your business as priority 1 or priority 2. I'm assuming you're a priority 1. Yes. And that's really going to allow you to go after those government contracts.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
We do have some questions in the chat. Just to make sure we get to them before we end our session.
I totally wasn't paying attention. So if there are questions in the chat, Raquel, will you point them out to me?
Yeah. So we have Loretta's and Bradley's question. How many corporations are registered with our BDO? I don't think we have that information. That would be on the Navajo Nation.
Don't. I've tried. Ask your council delegate the same question, because I've been asking business regulatory, that same question for some time. I can tell you that there are 218 certified businesses within the Navajo Nation. That's priority 1 and 2. And the only reason I know that is because they do post that on the website, on this website here, of who's registered under the certifications and registrations. And they just happen to have a list on here someplace about who's registered there. And so I counted literally every single one up to find out how many were registered at priority 1 and 2. But those are things that would allow the Navajo Nation to better regulate, but also understand the business environment within the Navajo Nation. I definitely encourage you to ask your council delegate and political leaders to consider how we could make their system more efficient. That would also promote tribal sovereignty, because we wouldn't be telling people, well, if you want to get a business registered quickly, you got to go to the state to get that done, because they could have a system like we see online with Arizona or New Mexico that would allow for it to be efficiently filed and record keeping done more efficiently than the paper copies.
Thank you, Tahda. And then next question we have is from Carrie. She commented, I may have missed this, but do you have to register your LLC on Navajo if you already registered it in Arizona?
Good question. Just to reiterate, if you're already registered in Arizona, you do have to register in Navajo Nation, but you are not registering as a new LLC. Don't do that. I've actually just had my business partner accidentally do that in his company, where he said, oh, I just thought I needed to register. He registered as a whole new entity, not as a foreign entity. So when you come into Navajo Nation with your LLC from Arizona, you'll go on to that business regulatory office, and I can come back to sharing my screen. Hold on just a sec. So once we're in here, once you're in this certifying and registering your business, it's gonna register your business over here. We'll pull you into a new set of documents, I believe. This is the Navajo Nation website, I understand, is getting revamped. It can be somewhat cumbersome to try to get in here because there's actually a registering a foreign entity form. And I might actually have to pull it up from my own, because this might be the problem. Forms for, you don't want to do this. Forms for limited liability. Let me see if it's in here. Oh, no, a foreign low profit. Hold on, it's got to be in here. You don't want to do this. You don't want to form a new one, but there is one that should be this foreign entity for an LLC. I knew there was something that I couldn't find on here before. So I have a form for that, and you might actually have to call them and ask them for this form and to have them email it to you. Wait, it's not on here. Oh, here we go. Application for registration. Here we go. Knew it was there. So here, let me go back just so we see. So once you're in here, it's halfway through in registration of a foreign LLC. If you are an entity formed in another jurisdiction, such as Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, Tahda A, White Mountain, and you come into Navajo, you're going to register this limited liability company. This is only for LLCs. So if you are a foreign corporation, you're going to have a different form coming into Navajo Nation to register. Also, for one of the things that I just wanted to make sure I take off or make sure I hit on is that once you register your business with the business regulatory in Navajo, also in other jurisdictions, you need to register with the tax department. So Navajo requires quarterly reporting. Even if you made no profits in Navajo, you still have to file a form saying you made no profits or made no income in Navajo and file it with the tax regulation tax authority office.
Hi. Yeah. So just really quick, I guess that was my question. But yeah, that was something that I had because I have an LLC that's registered through the Arizona Corp. So I wasn't sure because I live here on the reservation, but I do business between Hopi and Navajo, but I wasn't sure if I had to it's media and branding. So I wasn't sure if I had to register with Navajo, my LLC, if it's already established. So thank you so much for that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you're welcome. And also just, if you are doing work on Navajo and physically reside in Navajo, you probably want to be charging your customers your sales tax. Navajo requires work done or sales in Navajo be charged 6% sales tax. That's from service and goods. Arizona doesn't actually require a sales tax on service. So if you're physically within Arizona doing that service, you don't have to pay, but Navajo does. So it's just something to be mindful of. If you're physically doing the work within Navajo Nation and your customers are coming to you within the Navajo Nation, then you want to charge them that 6% sales tax from your company. And that gets reported, that gets handed over to the Navajo Nation for their tax. Different states tax in different ways, jurisdictions tax in different ways. Not all tribes tax within their within their jurisdictions, but a lot of them do, or some of them tax on certain things. So just to be mindful of that if you're crossing jurisdictions and doing different work physically within different jurisdictions. So just so you know.
Does that also count for nonprofit?
Yeah, so a nonprofit, you're still going to report your tax information. You're just not getting taxed. You qualify as tax exemption on your income, but you still have to report your income. And if you are operating within a jurisdiction offering services, you should be registering with that jurisdiction's regulatory board, whether it's the Corporation Commission or the Business Regulatory. So if you're a nonprofit that started in like New Mexico or Arizona and coming into Navajo Nation, you still have to register to do business, to be providing services within the jurisdiction within Navajo Nation itself. And then you would still file with the tax department, and you're just essentially filing the same thing because you should be bringing in money as a nonprofit. There's definitely money coming in. Otherwise, you can't pay your bills. You got to have that money coming in somehow, whether it's through donations or fee for service. In some sense, you're getting some sort of money that flows, and then you have to report that so that way, one, the tax department knows where money goes because it's all a check and balance for them. If you issue out 1065s or 1099s, one person's receiving the 1099, the other person's filing it, that type of stuff. It all gets checked and balanced at the IRS level so that they ensure one, that the federal government gets its taxes taken out, but then at the state or tribal level as well, that they're getting their taxes.
Would it be that same foreign form that you were talking about, or you would have to ask them?
Yeah, so for a nonprofit registering in the Navajo Nation, there are forms down here, foreign low profit limited liability. Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. It's not in here because we're all in. It's in here, incorporating. It's somewhere in here that you do it. You would register as a foreign corporation. That I'm just not finding it off the top of my head, but there is a form on here. If not, the business regulatory people are really kind and really responsive because I've had trouble finding things in this website before. And so if you call them and say, hey, I want to register my business, here it says foreign corporation, then you're going to submit these two things that tells you what to do right here. You're going to submit the certificate of authority, 2 copies of your state certified articles of incorporation. You actually have to go to your registering agency to get those certified copies, and then your certificate of good standing. So you send all of that to them. Duplicates, I have forgotten to always send 2. I, for some reason, get 2 and then forget to send the other one. So make sure you send 2 because they will literally not do anything until they have both of them with them. And you submit this stuff. So it says corporation, but you are essentially a corporation. Even if you're a nonprofit corporation, you still count as a corporation. And then it will document what that is for the Navajo Nation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. And then Valerie did have another question in the chat. Tahda, it says, can you be registered in more than one state or being with the nation better? Or is being with the nation better?
I think, Valerie, it's really dependent. You definitely can be registered as a foreign entity in multiple jurisdictions. So you get registered in one state, and that's sort of what creates your entity, whether it's a corporation or an LLC. And then if you want to go do business in another jurisdiction, another state, another tribe, you're still taking your business entity and just going to that other jurisdiction. So you can do that. You wouldn't, unless you wanted to create multiple different businesses, you wouldn't necessarily start a new LLC or new corporation in that other jurisdiction. You just register in multiple different jurisdictions. So like me as a lawyer, I'm licensed in multiple different jurisdictions: Colorado, Tahda A, Tonto, Navajo Nation. I'm registering to get applied. And so it's still me, the individual, going to all those jurisdictions and registering, but I'm not changing myself in that sense. And it's the same for a business. You'll have your home base, and that's where your actual entity gets formed. And then anytime you want to take that entity someplace else, you just registered into the next place that you're going as a foreign company, not as a new entity. And that foreign says, oh yeah, I was registered someplace else, and I'm just adhering to your jurisdiction. And then you have to abide by those jurisdictional laws within the state that you're operating in. It's kind of like the Missy Griner situation, right? Like, it may have been legal for her to smoke pot in Arizona, but when she went to Russia, that wasn't okay. And so now she's unfortunately paying a fairly heavy price for that. But it's the same thing here. So if you're operating in Navajo and you go to Arizona, do be mindful of their laws and their regulations around how they do business, where, for instance, I just pointed out, right, Arizona doesn't charge tax on their services if you're operating a service-based company. But if you come into Navajo and operate a service-based company, you need to be charging 6% of tax on that same service.
So then even if you're doing New Mexico and then Arizona, you need to make sure you're doing New Mexico tax, Arizona tax, your own tax, grandma tax, and making sure you're filing with everybody. Okay, I get that. Okay.
And the federal tax.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Federal tax.
Right?
Federal.
Yeah, so also I didn't quite get to that in the presentation, but you know, the other thing, once you start any of these entities, you take that entity name and you go onto the IRS website and you create an EIN. You can only do that Monday through Friday. I think it's like 7 a.m. to maybe like 9 p.m. But it's in a time schedule. So you still need to register your entity with the IRS, whatever name or corporation or LLC you have, and then it'll be issued its own tax ID, not your personal social security number, its own EIN. That's called an employee identification number. It comes from the IRS, and that's how you report your taxes up to the federal government. So yeah, there's a lot of different reporting. I think a lot of us don't understand when we start companies. I certainly didn't understand when I started my company, all of the different administrative tasks that were going to need to be accomplished and need to be done either on a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis. And so it really does help to make sure you look for good accountants, good tax people. I'd like to toot my horn about a lawyer, because, you know, a lawyer really will help you set up some decent documents, particularly if you have multiple people involved or investors who are going to come in. That will just help you kind of line up how that plays out for yourselves, or how to protect you as an individual in doing business with others. But there's administrative stuff will take up a bunch of your time as an owner of a company. And if you can get a routine around it or hire someone to help you ensure that you're doing it, that way you don't get into trouble in that sense, because it can be pretty hefty fines that come in if you don't do the reporting. And it can also block you. So if you're not paying your taxes and then you try to go do government contracting, you'll actually find out that you can't do government contracting because you owe the IRS money. And then they're saying, well, you can't contract with us. Or if you try to get grants and you haven't been paying your taxes as a company or reporting those taxes, it can prevent you from getting grants as well. So just to be mindful. Really make sure you have a good accountant that you're speaking to, but you can't just rely solely on an accountant. Hopefully Change Labs offers some sort of classes like that goes over what type of reporting needs to happen. I know I work with another organization called NABEDC. They're physically located in Phoenix. It's NABEDC. And we had just put in a grant to try to do some classes about transaction privilege license and when you need to register for that, and different types of taxes that need to be paid for different types of companies that are doing business.
We're gonna try and get through these next few questions within the next couple of minutes or 10 minutes. I have one from Francine Bradley. At what point would you register your business, when you're starting up or when you're ready to start your business?
That's a really good question. Some people like to start up before. Well, okay, let me step back. The best advice I ever received was just to start. And I would pass that on at some point, because whether or not you have to come back and clean something up, or whether or not you spend a lot of time detailing it, you just need to start something eventually. And I think sometimes, particularly me, I can have the habit of overthinking things. And so I'll think through a process without necessarily, I want everything to be perfect. And if you're trying to make everything perfect, then you never actually get started. And so at some point, it's just easier to start and register the business. But then you have to be mindful, right, that you've got reporting requirements that are going to start occurring once you actually file that business. So that can be going on in the background. It can be really helpful, again, if you're trying to raise money, to have more traction, so you can show, oh, my business has been in business for a year, 2 years, 3 years. But if you're not trying to do that, then you just really need to start when you have the capacity to actually do the administrative side of the work, which is, registering the company, getting those operating agreements, the EIN, and that sort of stuff in place. And once that's in place, then you can let it ride for a little bit. I have started companies and just saw them sat there for a year or two while no one's really doing anything with the company. It's just sort of sitting there and waiting for someone to take a hold of it. So that it's really up to you and when it's a good time for you to start that.
Thank you, Tahda. And then we have a question from Winona. I'm currently in the startup phase of my business, and for tax purposes, in the time being, I'm under the category of sole proprietorship. Should I register my business or hold off until my revenue is larger and more consistent?
I would not wait to start a business based off the revenue. And just primarily, again, with that sole proprietor, you're putting yourself at risk. If you create an entity, if you have an entity in place, whether it's a corporation or an LLC, you're creating a shield of liability between yourself and things that could happen. There are, just situations that occur in the world where you might want to protect your own assets from others being able to come after them. But also, just if you're running a business, I will frankly think it's about appearances. People, when they see an LLC or an Inc. or something, they kind of know that you are really a business person because you've taken the time to go through the registration process. And so you're sort of indicating to others, it's like getting MBA after your name, or ESQ, right? Or an MD. It sort of indicates to other people your level of proficiency within what you are doing. And so by creating that LLC indication, you're letting other people know that you have a basic understanding of business. And that can mean something sometimes. Appearances do mean something, unfortunately, in our society. And so it can help you as far as a company. But what I can also say is that what you don't want to be doing is getting so far into business, because this stuff does take a little bit of time to learn. We just sat through an 1.5 hour presentation on it, right? And you don't want to have to go back and then be trying to change it later on, or get in the Gallup Bakery woman, right, who has this really great name and she wants to use it. And then she might go and find that she's registering it, but somebody else has this really great name that they want to use. And so the earlier you can get in and get that stuff sort of started, the more you can just really start to focus on your business and what you need to do to grow your business. And you're not trying to backtrack and lay the foundation for it after you've already started getting clients coming in, because it can be confusing for your clients if you change your name. In your company, say you're doing your name as your own business, but then you want to change because you now have to have this LLC nomenclature, taxation wise, bank accounts wise. Also, if you're operating as a sole proprietor, I hope you have a very good accountant, because you want to be documenting everything. Every little expense goes into your actual deductions. And when you have your own bank account for a company, I'm not always the best at paperwork, despite being a lawyer, I will admit that. But if you have your own bank account for the company, then it's a lot easier to track your income and expenses just automatically because it's being put into its own bank account. And you can't do that unless you actually have an entity formed. Otherwise, you're just starting a bank account under your own personal name. So I would highly encourage you to move into some sort of entity sooner than later.
And real quick, this is Winona. I asked that question. Do the tax, like all of the taxes that you were mentioning when it comes to LLCs, does that also apply to sole proprietorship? So if I'm going to go to the Navajo Nation or Arizona or New Mexico as a sole proprietorship, do I still have to like really keep track of the taxes?
Yes.
In all different states, federal too?
Yes, you do. You still have to be charging for all those taxes. If you're selling goods in Arizona, you need to have a transaction privilege license. And then you have to report the tax on that. So like literally if you're selling jewelry or candles or soap or t-shirts, you need to be charging tax to the person you're selling it to. So you aren't yourself paying the tax, you're actually passing that tax on to your customer, and then they're charging it. Just like if you go to a gas station, you look at your receipt, you're going to see how much the gas was, then you're going to see like 3 lines, especially if you're like at a gas station in Window Rock or at a gas station off, you'll see that they're charging Navajo tax, they're charging the state tax, they're charging all these different taxes to the customer. So you definitely want to be charging those to your customers and then remitting them up to the state. So it's kind of on you as the business owner to collect that tax and then remit that tax onto the state. And so I've seen people get in trouble where they collect that tax, but then they don't pass the tax on. So it's really not your money. It's just you're operating as the pass-through person. And so you are responsible to collect it and then pass it. So I would put it into a separate bank account so that you don't confuse it with your own income as well. But yeah, you've definitely got to collect the taxes in all the places that you're doing the work. But so if you're doing work in Arizona and not doing it in Navajo, you don't have to collect the Navajo tax. But once you do the work in Navajo, you have to collect the Navajo tax and remit that to the Navajo Tax Authority, not to the Arizona Tax Authority. So yeah, this is where the administrative stuff starts to be a little bit much as a business owner, where it's like, oh my gosh, so many jurisdictions and paperwork and reporting times to keep track of.
So are you saying that if we're servicing on the Navajo Nation, because I'm servicing in New Mexico. So if I'm servicing on the Navajo Nation, we're paying the Navajo taxes or the Navajo Nation taxes I'm paying for the junk food tax and the Arizona tax.
You're not paying for the Arizona tax. You're paying, if you are selling food in Navajo Nation, you're going to be doing that junk food tax and you're going to be collecting the sales tax at 6%. So that would be like if you're sending out an invoice, you'll have or if you had a receipt and you've got a point of sale, you'll have literally the tax that will say Navajo sales tax, and then you'd have the Navajo junk food tax. And those taxes are calculated based off your gross sales amount. So say you sell an item for $10. You yourself are getting the $10, but then you're charging that 6% sales tax. So you're charging on an additional 60 cents. And I don't know what the junk food sales tax is, but let's say it's 5% for ease of mind. You're also going to charge on that next 50 cents. And so you're really charging your customer $11.10, but you're keeping 10 of it. 50 cents is going to the sales tax and 50 cents is going to the junk food sales tax and 60 cents is going to the tax. So that $1.10 you're collecting for the tax. And then every quarter you're submitting that tax amount with a check, literally either a check or a money order to the taxation office in Navajo Nation.
Right. I was just wondering if we're paying the Arizona as well.
No.
Okay.
Okay. And then we have Armando's question. His comment is, if I have 3 sole proprietorship businesses with intent to become LLCs for each, I work with multiple clients and multiple chapters. Do I file and register for each chapter or for the Navajo Nation in its entirety? If so, where?
You register for the Navajo Nation in its entirety, not at each chapter level. And I will go back to my share screen real quick. In the Navajo Nation, everything gets done through this website. Let me drop it down a little, navajobusiness.com. And this is where you can find the forms that we went over today. I know this is being recorded, so I might ask you to go back and watch the recording. But within here is where you're going to register your business. It's in doing business and then starting a business on the Navajo Nation. And then once you register your LLC, your first LLC, you'll just keep doing that for each separate business. I would, at some point want to be curious about why you have 3 different ones if you're doing 3 incredibly different things, or maybe you're just doing different types of work, but it can all be under one business. And the only reason I ask that is because, when you do own multiple different companies, we've just gone over how much work it is to just do the administration of one. Once you start to have 2 or 3, you're doing the administration for each one. So it just doubles up on the stuff. And so if you can try to combine them, I would really highly encourage people to do that, because it does reduce your administrative paperwork. But then again, there might be, for instance, I have a design company and I have a law firm, and it's 2 very different work. Sometimes they overlap, but my law firm doesn't do design work and my design work doesn't do legal services. And so I try to separate those 2 because it's completely different work. But if I could, and legally I could in Arizona, combine my law firm into my design company, it would be a lot less of a headache administrative wise. But for my clients and for appearances and again, branding, because your brand is really your reputation. I think people would be confused if I suddenly started saying, oh, I'm doing this work under this company that hasn't been known for doing that type of work. So just to be in, to keep in mind about how you might structure things that can help. Or you could do the different branding you might have missed, where you have one LLC, but you're doing business as different brands. So maybe you have a consulting company as one brand, and maybe you have a marketing development company as another brand. They're not really different companies. It's just a different brand of yourself doing different work within one holding company as an LLC. I hope I didn't confuse you more.
All right. I think we're going to end at that point. Thank you, Tahda. I do have one last announcement before we log off, everybody. If you have any questions at all about today's presentation, feel free to email me. And then thanks again to Tahda for being here with us and sharing all that information. Thank you for all our audience members for being here with us today, and for all your questions and your participation. It was a really great conversation. I know I learned a lot. If you missed any of the presentation today from Tahda or myself, this session is recorded and will be posted to Change Lab's YouTube channel later this week. And then my email is here, raquel@nativestartup.org. And then my last announcement is for our next workshop. We have guest James Biligotti, who will be sharing his humorous outlook on his life experiences as an entrepreneur, a business owner, and a public figure on the Navajo Nation throughout all the years that he's worked here. And then that will be Wednesday again, August 24th, same time at 11:30. Thank you again, everybody. I hope you all have a great rest of your day and be safe out there.